talent that you're growing as an incubator for your organization so that they can be redeployed to continue to grow and develop within your organization and add value, not only for themselves, but for your company.
Hello, and welcome to the Talent Acquisition Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dull, and on this show, we interview today's industry leaders in talent acquisition to discuss challenges, best practices, and what the future holds. If you are working in talent acquisition and have always wanted to sit down with your peers at other companies to exchange ideas and learn, well, this show is the next best thing. Join us each week as we bring you a new expert interview and extract their expertise. This episode is brought to you by SageMark HR. Transform your recruiting practices with leading-edge technology. Selecting the right recruiting solutions to enable your strategy is one of the biggest challenges leaders face today. You know technology will help, but searching all the options to find out what will work best for your specific needs can be both overwhelming and time-consuming. At SageMark HR, we make selecting the right recruiting technology easy. Our proven process has helped companies such as 3M, Comcast, Stryker, Walgreens, and many more. Reach out to us at SageMark HR for a free consultation to learn how we can help you improve results with less stress and confidently change from reacting to leading. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Talent Acquisition Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dull, and today I have a conversation with Jessica Aguilar. Jessica is the Global Head of Talent Acquisition for Zurich Insurance Group. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited about our conversation. We've known each other for a while, and this will be a great conversation. So let's get started, as we always do, and just share a little bit about your background, how you got started in talent acquisition, maybe some of the roles that you've had leading up to your current role.
Absolutely. So background was in IT coming out of undergrad. Loved technology, but learned that I hated writing code. And quickly pivoted and took a role at a brand and marketing firm that was part of Omnicom. So it was a subsidiary that really focused primarily on employer brands, strategic sourcing, and talent attraction. Big Fortune 50 organizations, more from a consulting perspective. And it was at a really pivotal time for a lot of those things because they were being taken very seriously, and a lot of big brands were trying to grow capabilities. So I loved the work and ended up joining one of those firms to really build out their employer brand management from the inside out at a time they'd just gone through a huge mega merger. So it was a challenge, but it was actually amazing work. I learned so much and fell in love with HR and talent acquisition. And really, that's where I started my TA career. Grew up through that organization, heading up talent acquisition teams, strategic sourcing teams, eventually the full TA team, as well as executive recruitment. And that then brought me over to my current role in Zurich.
No, that's a great background. You probably are one of the few that I've talked to with an IT background. So that's another new one. My degree's in chemistry, so that has not quite interesting, but that's a great background. Thank you for sharing that. If you wouldn't mind for the audience, share a little bit about maybe the size and scope of your role, the size of Zurich and like how many hires you do, how big your team is, some of those kind of scope elements so the audience has some perspective.
Sure. So Zurich is actually a multi-line insurer that serves people in over 200 countries, which means we have a very disparate workforce, 60,000 employees worldwide. Within North America specifically, we service 95% of the Fortune 500. And from a makeup of our talent acquisition team, we have really tried to lean into some of our core commitments around how we feel our business best performs. And that is with a core enablement from our group. So I sit here in Zurich, Switzerland as part of the Zurich Insurance Group, but also a lot of flexibility and empowerment at the local level. Because we're in so many different jurisdictions, it's really important. Regulations are very nuanced, cultures are very nuanced. And so for us, it's very important not to be a one size fits all, but instead to have a really strong core and a lot of flexibility for our 200 plus talent acquisition consultants and team members who sit out in those markets to be able to customize as they need to. So it's a complicated yet effective matrix approach to talent acquisition, where we really try to drive some of the core branding, talent attraction, technology, all of those pieces, and then allow for some empowerment at the local level to bring them to life.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I know through all of our previous conversations, you and your team led some really impressive initiatives over the last several years. It would be great if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe a couple of those initiatives or things you're most proud of, or maybe even some of the biggest challenges that you've overcome over the last couple of years.
So a few key initiatives that I'm really proud of. One would be our forecasting model that we brought into play shortly after I joined our North American team. When I joined Zurich, I actually joined in a VP talent acquisition role for Zurich North America, which is a subsidiary of Zurich Insurance Group. And quickly found that we really needed to have a common language between talent acquisition, finance, and our business on how we were forecasting recruitment needs, how we were working against those plans, how they coincided with our headcount plans, and a really measurable way to articulate not only our pace of progress, but actually how many vacancies we were having. And it was in the right area, right? And if they were even anticipated in a really data-driven manner. And that hadn't existed before. And that was actually a huge amount of work because you really have to get under the hood with a lot of different people to understand what plans look like, what actuality of timing in those plans look like, going backwards and trying to articulate trend at a not as tricky time, perhaps, as the couple of years to follow that, challenging nonetheless. And then really building a model that could be replicated and could be updated on a quarterly basis and serve as a jumping off point for those conversations. And I was really proud of that because when it first kicked off, there wasn't a lot of energy or interest in it. And then we had the pandemic, and coming out of the pandemic and during the pandemic, we were very internally focused, really prioritizing our internal talents, looking at how we could repurpose talent to make it work during a really ambiguous time period. And coming out of that, we had that huge spike in hiring that everyone saw, the Great Resignation, all of this really interesting, groundbreaking piece that led to the embracing of this model that we had kind of been shopping around and trying to get some interest on. And all of a sudden, it was part of our quarterly business unit reviews that everyone be really focused on this. And it allowed us and enabled us to be really successful in navigating that time period because it was a very data-driven approach to help our business understand what we needed to be effective for them. So I was really proud of that because it was multifunctional presence in the room, and it was a cross collaboration that really resulted in solid results and was recognized by our business as talent acquisition, really enabling the business, which is what we're here to do. I was really proud of that.
That's great. I know everyone struggles with workforce planning and forecasting and trying to do that. So it sounds like you've built out a really solid model that both your team and the business rallies behind. Is there any advice you would have for others or any key learnings for others that are trying to start that journey or are somewhere along that journey to build that out?
Workforce planning is really challenging. It's the topic, it comes up and I feel like the room clears, right?
Yeah.
Because it's something that everyone wants, but it's really challenging to have a really strong and actionable strategic workforce plan. So what I would say is don't give up, get the right people at the table. And it is really hard work to build any kind of forecasting model that's based on headcount and headcount future state needs because businesses are really dynamic. So you have growth in some areas, you might have divestments in others, and you're trying to create a balance. But I've found that sometimes doing the work that no one else wants to do, A, is a great way to learn, but B, has the biggest payoffs. So I would just tell people to stick with it and create a team that's cross-functional so that people are bringing that information that you might not have to the table and that there's some buy-in, right? You have people who are your partners in it and are helping to bring that message to their leadership as well. I think goes a long way.
That's great. Thank you for that. Any other initiatives that you wanted to share, or would you like to move on in the conversation?
One other I would share, just because I am a technology geek, is I do believe we've had a really great roadmap over the past few years on building out our tech stack as it relates to talent acquisition. And that's a challenging thing to do because sometimes it can be a swing and a miss, but I'm really proud of the way globally we've been able to bring a lot of our big markets together to create a basis for greater automation of some of our administrative tasks and some of our day-to-day, even things like online interview scheduling and a bi-directionally integrated CRM, things that really help improve the hiring experience, not only for our job seekers, but also for our hiring managers and our recruiters. I'm a big believer that if the process is working really well for talent acquisition, it has a halo effect on all of the other stakeholders involved. So if you start by looking at that process with a mind of really process reengineering versus looking as a technology, anytime I bring on technology, it's always, okay, so what's the process reengineering going to be? How are we actually going to make this happen? And how is it going to be technology enabled but process driven? Because the biggest misses I've seen is trying to retrofit a technology and your existing process. The biggest wins I've seen is when you take a step back to say, what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? And maybe there's a few different roads we can get there. And how can technology help us to do it? Because I think that's how you get to a more human-centric experience. And I think that's really important to differentiate yourself from a talent attraction perspective, but also just to win in the market where we have some really hard to fill roles that we go after. We're very focused on professional services roles, and it is really challenging sometimes to get that talent in the door.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that. And it's extremely hard for TA teams to get their tech right. It's almost like everything is stacked against them. Everyone has different agendas. The technology is there to sell technology. IT is there to streamline systems and make the integrations as easy as possible. And procurement's trying to get the lowest price and all of these types of, it's all these conflicting agendas. And TA leaders have to really stand strong. And what you said, I think resonates is that really, if you want to improve the experience, it always starts with the recruiter experience and how technology enables that process and improves their experience that then ends up improving the experience for all other stakeholders through that process. But it is hard to get your tech stack, and you really have to be disciplined and structured and thoughtful on a lot of things going through that process to be able to get it right. And we've talked multiple times, and I appreciate how you've approached that. And I'm sure your team does as well, because there's a huge failure rate because of all those things that we talked about.
Yeah, I can agree more.
Yeah, so let's talk about the future a little bit. So now, as you're looking forward, maybe over the next year or two, what are some key priorities or initiatives that your team is focused on now?
One area we're really focused on is people sustainability. So I mentioned the pandemic and really prioritizing our internal talents. In 2020, we really thought about this as work sustainability, and that's evolved quite a bit. Zurich, as an organization, has a huge commitment to sustainability, to our customers, our climate, our communities, and also our people. And one of the ways we feel we can really bring that to life through our talent acquisition efforts and really empowering current employees to grow their talents and giving them new opportunities to gain new skills, to reskill and grow their existing skills, and to gain mentorship, secondment opportunities, that 70-20-10 of how you learn. But how do we pull that into our internal mobility efforts and really make that a momentum builder for individuals who are with us today and are looking to grow their careers with us? So we have strong aspiration around increasing the share of internal hires across our group as part of our current strategic cycle. And I think as we look towards the future, a lot of our efforts are built around how can we help enable that? How can we help connect that skills building with actually gaining the next opportunity? How can we really rethink the way we do things? I'm often surprised to think how easy it is for people to find talent externally or look for new opportunities externally, and how challenging they feel it is at their current organization, and insert any organization name there. I don't feel like this is specific to any one company. I feel like this is a drumbeat that I hear out in the external marketplace often. And I do talk to a lot of people because I really enjoy people. I enjoy seeing people get new opportunities. So I find myself talking to people who are sharing a very similar experience to maybe someone I could talk to down the hall at their current organization. And I think that's in large part the way tools are designed. So when we think about that process reengineering and you think about recruitment technology, LinkedIn is huge. So I hear a lot of people say, I've got a profile on LinkedIn. Okay, great. But when I think about technology as it relates to a job seeker, it's really easy for them to aggregate opportunities externally. It's really easy for recruiters to identify talents externally. For whatever reason, the way technology is designed, it sometimes is more problematic to try to replicate that within the soft walls of your organization. And similarly, it is sometimes harder to shoulder tap and attract new talents the way you would externally if you're sitting within an organization. So there's this mindset piece around having enterprise talent that you're growing as an incubator for your organization so that they can be redeployed to continue to grow and develop within your organization and add value, not only for themselves, but for your company. And I think that's a challenge in a lot of companies right now. One, I feel like we're making some good progress on, but I don't think we've completely cracked it.
That is a very interesting point of view, and I appreciate you sharing that. I 100% agree with you. And it's almost like most TA organizations are doing it backwards. They're spending all this time and effort on these passive sourcing tools and things like that, but ignoring and making it more difficult for internal talent, which is the highest converting, highest performing. It's just such a benefit and value to your organization to enable that. But a lot of the focus is focused on passive sourcing is the most expensive, lowest converting source usually, but there's all this time and attention, and there is a place for it, but need to focus on internal talent and provide those kind of career lattices or career ladders or opportunities for internal talent to drive retention and performance and engagement and all of those things that add value to the business. And then focusing on referrals and previous applicants and all of these other things that are a much more valuable source before getting to that. But the sourcing part tends to be the sexier, more tool-driven thing that everybody focuses on. It's kind of weird.
On the technology market, I definitely think it is. You're starting to see more optionality that really encompasses tools that can be deployed to focus on internal mobility. But a big focus of our people sustainability is that skilling, providing. We do have a platform for our employees to go on, self-assess, identify how their skills match up with other roles within the organization they might have interest in the future, and identify a skilling plan for themselves. We have opportunities for them to go gain secondment experience where they can serve in a partial or full-time role for a specified need to gain that additional experience while contributing. But when I think about all of those pieces, and even our many locations, we're offering internal referral programs. So our employees can, even similarly to an external referral program, refer their colleagues and encourage them to be considered for roles. So all of those things are great. But I think that piece you just mentioned a moment ago, Ryan, about valued. Everyone wants to be valued. So when I think about people sustainability, the other aspect of that is also DEIB. That is part of how we think about our people sustainability approach and the ability to have diverse minds and build innovation and feed the success of our organization. And by bringing people into roles where they're skilling up, you are often bringing a different mindset, fresh perspective, but also a lot of intellectual capital about our organization. Even if someone is changing functions, they're bringing a lot of knowledge and experience and an ability to navigate that someone externally will have to ramp up and build. So there's a lot of value there. And as I think about DEIB, that piece on belonging, I think is really important. And when we focus on people sustainability and we focus on internal mobility, there's this underpinning of, we do this because we want you to feel like your career belongs here and that we value you. And everything you bring to us, we also value. So I think those themes are inextricably linked when you think about talent, because it isn't just about how do we move more people. It's also how they feel about us as an employer. And that obviously feeds into the authenticity of our employer brand, of how our value proposition is perceived. So you can't really separate one from the other. And it truly is how we can be successful in having the right people in the right role when we need them there, is really by doubling down on our internal talents.
That is so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is extremely valuable for the audience, and I appreciate that you shared that. So kudos to you and your team for that initiative and your thought leadership in that space. Last question I would have for you is, you've shared a lot already, but our audience is made up of talent acquisition professionals primarily, and some others that are interested in the talent acquisition profession. Do you have some advice for those folks, either things that you share with your team, things that resonated that somebody shared with you in your past, or just general advice that you would share for somebody in the TA space?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think if you love people, it's a great space to be. It's often the space when you talk to people, as you mentioned, they come from a different background and find themselves in TA, but I think that's great. And the reason it's great is because you get a lot of different perspectives. And a mentor told me once, do the work no one else wants to do. That's the greatest way to learn. And I believe that. And I am a lifelong learner. And I like pushing myself into spaces where maybe I don't know anything and I'm going to have to really ramp up. And maybe it's work that people have said, stay away from it. Oftentimes when I hear, that's what attracts me to it. The thing I've probably benefited most from, though, is tying back to that idea of diverse perspectives. I found that when someone says something that you fully disagree with, that you just can't dismiss it. That's when I really believe you should double down and spend time understanding where someone's coming from. Because the greatest learnings I've had across any of the areas I've worked in have been from really listening to someone whose opinion was a complete departure from my own. And I know as humans, we have this similarity bias. So if it's familiar, we unconsciously gravitate towards that. But I find that doing the things that break some of those biased ways of thinking that are bumping around on our neural pathways, and allow those to rebuild. They open our mind, they test our convictions, and they also expand our network with people who are willing to challenge our ways of thinking. And that's where I think real innovation comes from. And I just feel like no matter what you're doing, if you're in talent acquisition, if you are a leader, a CHRO, if you're out in a business, if you are just someone who's trying to think about what they want to do next, I'd say one of the most important things you can do is spend some time with someone who thinks completely dissimilarly from you.
That is excellent advice. I read an excellent book on that topic. It's called Don't Believe Everything You Think. It's a short read, but it's really good. And I believe in that 100%, that one of the most difficult things, and probably one of the biggest struggles I had as a TA leader, was actually admitting I don't know everything. I don't like it. It's okay to get help on things. It's okay not to have an opinion on everything, to take all these diverse opinions and really learn and be open to that and think through things. And it's really hard. I get it. Executives are put in a position to make good decisions and to kind of expect them to know things. And it's, as the speed of business increases, it becomes increasingly hard to know everything. And one of the hardest things is to admit you don't know something and to get help and input from others. And so being open to that and getting diverse opinions and people that think 180 degrees different than you and listening and learning is so powerful.
I will definitely pick up that book. That is a great recommendation. I will be jotting that down. And I agree, it's liberating, right? You don't know. None of us do. And the most powerful teams are the ones where everybody has a voice because of that, right?
Absolutely. Well, Jessica, great job. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all this great information on your journey. I appreciate you and I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Talent Acquisition Leaders Podcast. If something we said today resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and download our podcast and share the episode with your network. Ready to transform your recruiting practices with leading-edge technology, just like our other clients at 3M, Comcast, Stryker, and Walgreens? Then reach out at sagemarkhr.com for a free consultation.